Grab your seats to witness an extremely important discussion on blended learning, a digital equalizer, moderated by Sandeep Rai, Chief of City Operations Teach for India. With him on the panel, we have Namita Dalmia, Director Investments, Umedia Network, Prachi Vinlas Jain, Director India, Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, India LLP, Huda Sultan, student at Teach for India, Mekin Maheshwari, founder and CEO, Udyam Learning Foundation, and Nalika Briganza, Program Director, Training and Impact Teach for India. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thank you so much for that, Prerna. Inspire 2020 audience, it is good to be here with all of you. It's ready to close out what I know will be day 3 of the conference. We have a pretty exciting and incredible group of people joining us today, which we will be talking about an issue that is topical and highly pertinent to the field of education right now, and that is the role of technology. When you pull technology and education together, you get a term that the world is now buzzing with: blended learning. And strictly defined for those of us who aren't familiar, blended learning is essentially it's a modern style of education that combines online learning that is individualized often, so asynchronous learning, with traditional face-to-face. So it's live instruction combined with online learning. And the usage of technology, it probably goes back to education about 50 years. But the field in almost every single year has seen advancements, it has seen improvements. Yet anyone in the field of education will tell you that over these last 6 months, it has grown significantly. And since this pandemic hit, to give a bit of context, more than 191 countries have shut down schools. You've got 1.6 billion kids that have been affected, and governments across the world, faced with a lot of tough decisions, have basically resorted to technology. And now all of these institutions, these schools, are stepping back and they're saying, well, wait a minute. What if technology can actually fundamentally change how we think about education? What if we could continue to use technology when schools reopen? And so to help us better understand all of that, we have 5 pretty incredible people with us today. Thank you, all of you, for being with us. My hope is that our audience can learn so much from you today. And so a lot of gratitude as we start this panel. Huda, we're going to start with you. You've been a student in a Teach for India classroom for several years now. You've been attending a school in Hyderabad. And over the past 6 months, you've actually had to use technology extensively to keep your learning going. And so to get us started, tell us what that's been like. What has been a day in the schedule for you? What are you liking about it? What's your schedule using technology been like over the past few months?
Hi, Priya, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, I'll start with something that I really like about blended learning, which is that I think blended learning has gave us such a big opportunity to be independent learners. When I went back to me, before in my own classroom, I got so busy in doing homeworks and assigning in just doing assignments, and just I never let that boundaries of boundaries of homeworks, all the assignments and all, I never pushed that. But I think in the blended learning I really got to push that boundaries with trying to learn something new with my own self. No matter it is not only from academics but also from different skills, and I think I really liked something that really helped me in this is that utilizing the resources we have already and paying back attention to the to that resources and taking back as how will these help me out. And I think I would never reach out to the resources that I already have on the internet, on offline, and I would never let myself cross that boundaries and let myself learn by independently if not blended learning. I think And I think like my very important thing that blended learning have does is that like it has pushed us to adapt in the learning process, like from learning how to use Zoom and moving to using Google Classrooms, then moving to using Google Forms and everything. Like I think it has a whole process of learning, and this has taught us how to adapt in the very hard situations, because as the blended learning was very new for us in the first month. It really gave us a shock about how will we really adapt all these things. But once we start during this process, I think it is really something that really helped out us. And I think in the schedule in blended learning, what it looks like is it starts from async hours. I think like before classroom, we just get async packets where we just get prepare for the next class, and also at the same time revise have a quick revision of the last class. And then we move forward to our online classes, which is only for 45 minutes, but give us a lot of teach us a lot of things. And then we move forward for like our sync hours, where we just go use things like Google Classroom and just do our assignments and try to use the resources that are already there on online, like watching some videos and all, and learning and just analyzing from it. And I think during this whole process we get to learn a lot about not only researching for the resources, but also how to analyze it. So that's what I think about blended learning.
Yeah, thank you for that, Hada. Heard stuff like it's making me more independent, it's more engaging, it's pushing a lot of my boundaries, I'm learning different skills. Heard thing about like I'm learning about what digital skills are now, right? So I heard a lot that came out there as you shared. Namita, we heard from Hada. She talked us even through what a schedule of her day was like, right? So I'm using videos, I'm learning stuff independently, and then I'm attending online classes. You've been working with education, even with technology for several years, right? Before Midyear, I know you were leading the education vertical at CSF. When you zoom out, what do you see as the promise and potential of technology in education?
Thanks, Sandeep. And I think this is so evolving, and every day, every year is a new learning. So I hope I'm able to do justice to the question that you are asking. So I think couple of things before talking about the potential, really, right? So first of all, when I think about education technology, before thinking technology, I think pedagogy, right? And it's really the pedagogy that we are thinking about. Unfortunately, a lot of time, EdTech gets equated to content, which I think is the wrong way of thinking about it. So I want to differentiate between content and pedagogy at the beginning itself, right? Like it's not about digitizing textbooks or making content available. It's about taking the pedagogy and using the technology or online power of being online or on being on internet, online, offline, using technology to really democratize and hopefully make it equitable. I don't think we are still making it equitable, because it's not, again, technology and internet, the availability of hardware and internet is still not ubiquitous, right? So that is another topic that we can talk about. But really, I think just first of all, differentiating between content and pedagogy, and what are you doing, and starting from pedagogy before even getting into the technology is an important one. I think my learnings on education technology, it's not one size fits all. I think we have to even think about learners at different age groups. We have to think about, okay, what do kids in grade 1 to 5 need, or even before that, right? What are the requirements for grade 6 to 8? So really kind of, and then really say, okay, what is the pedagogy that works best for them, and what is then that blended learning that can work, that should be adopted, right? So an online live class which works for 1,000 students, where one teacher is teaching and there is some moderation happening, may not work for a grade 6 to 8, let alone for a grade 1 to 5 student, right? So just wanted to first even differentiate, like you have to think about models differently. I think most of the times we experiment with one thing and say, okay, this is one thing that should be applicable to everything that we are doing in using education technology. Having said that, I think my key learnings in terms of edtech is really it's about scaling a great teacher and removing geographic boundaries. It could be in form of asynchronous video content, but it can also be in form of an online learning. But guidance and assistance is an important element of that, right? And that can happen. Guidance and assistance from a teacher can happen in an offline world when technology is being used in a classroom, in an offline classroom, and in this case, it can be used in an online environment. So, and why do we need that, right? I think we cannot take away the teacher or this adult facilitator away from and just give technology in the hands of students. It's for two reasons primarily. I think one is teacher plays the role of focused discipline, right? Like Huda is an example of a self-motivated self-learner, right? And she may probably need lesser intervention of focus and discipline, but majority of our students, 95, 97% of our students will need more of that. And then second, we need that because we want, students get stuck, they need some intervention, they need help with doubts resolution, they also need encouragement, right? So you cannot take away that human element. And that's why we talk about blended learning, right? Of course, there is data, technology allows us to use data to personalize material and support. But I think where there is one limitation is we haven't really solved for how to make data easily accessible and digestible by the teacher or the adult facilitator, right? So I think that's where a lot of implementation goes bad if we're really not, and we're not able to harness the full power of technology if we're not doing that. I think the other element of pedagogy, you guys are expert at it for the students that you teach. When you think about, okay, what is going well in the offline environment and which parts of it we can take online, which parts of it we still need to do by the teachers. And maybe some of those things do not translate online, right? So you have to think about newer pedagogical forms. But one pedagogical element that I want to emphasize is on peer learning, right? And that technology can help facilitate, and I think it's an important one to think about. So these are some of the things that at least I have started to believe that, unless we get some of these things right, we will always be talking at the surface level. And having said that, I'm still also continuing to learn in terms of how to fully harness the potential of technology. I think in India, we're still scratching the surface. Frankly, a lot of this has been on the after school space where parents are, paying for right thing. We're not getting into that debate, but the school environment, private schools or government schools are now being pushed a lot more with pandemic also. I think there's an opportunity to create a better demand for right quality and right type of edtech. And I think until that happens, a lot of our children will not really be able to benefit from edtech true potential. Whether it is from how you design it, but how do you learn it? I hope I answered your questions at least partly, but happy to dig deeper. But
very much so. Heard a lot of things, pedagogy and not just content, right? And the role of the teacher and how do you basically pull in guidance and assistance and now, I'd love to build on that a little bit, right? Like there's a ton of debate out there right now about what the role of the teacher should be. You've got some corners arguing that technology might be able to even replace the teacher. And yet only 2 to 3 years ago, the US Department of Education actually released a report that combined a bunch of studies saying that technology works best when augmented by the role of the teacher. And so to be able to do that, we have to define what the role of the teacher is. And so you've been working really closely with teachers. What do you see as the role of the teacher in blended learning?
Are you asking me or?
Nalika.
Okay, great. Super.
Thank you, Sandeep. First, I just want to say, Namita, as you were sharing, I just kept nodding. I was like, I'm going to make note of this as well. When I think of that question, Sandeep, what is the responsibility of a teacher in the blended world? I do think some of it is very similar to the in-person world, right? And when I'm thinking about teachers, the role of having an older mentor human being around, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I don't think any amount of technology can take that away. Just the human touch that a person provides, the warmth, guidance. So that's one thing that I think stays constant. I think a lot of it depends on how we've looked at teaching and learning even before the pandemic. So I know, for example, one way that I've seen teachers teach is to stand in the front of the class and read from the textbook. And that can be converted online, but if I'm looking at it, I think the role of a teacher in blended learning is to be able to say, what are the needs of my students, or to diagnose those needs in the first place, to be able to be the facilitator of learning, to curate learning experiences for children based on those needs. And so not somebody who's a content disseminator or somebody who says, come onto a call and I'm just going to talk at you, but someone who's able to say, what are the diverse needs? How can I curate experiences that match these needs? And then how can I build the investment, the engagement, and the want and desire in students to be able to access that, right? Like when I was listening to Huda sharing, just her ability to say, my limits have been stretched. What does it take for a teacher to be able to do that for as many students as possible? So yeah, so those are a couple of things that are on my mind, I think. One other thing that I've seen, and that's particularly post the pandemic, but I've seen teachers who've been successful in this environment so far in these last few months. They've been learners themselves before anything else. And again, that's something we've said so much before the pandemic as well, saying as a teacher, you need to be a learner first, you need to learn and upskill yourself. But I think you cannot survive in this environment without being an incredibly strong learner, without being able to think of the problem that you're facing, and then think of what are potential solutions, where can I research, what can I read, whose class can I visit, and then what can I incorporate in my lessons to make them fabulous. So yeah, those are just a couple of thoughts on my mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the ability to diagnose where kids are and to help curate experiences for my kids that they can access. Prachi, the EdTech Lab at the Central Square Foundation, they actually recently released a report arguing that two forms of blended learning are showing a lot of promise. One of them is adaptive learning. And so technology is able to personalize learning for kids. And the other one is gamification. And a few studies have come out showing that these two are showing a lot of promise. I'm curious to know from you, what are you seeing as promising examples as both of these? And what do you see as the potential of both of these?
Thanks, Sandeep. Sandeep, let me go a little bit off topic and come back to the question that you're asking. So I want to start with the example of Himachal. We've been working in the state for many years now. We've been working in 3 states, Haryana, Himachal, and Rajasthan, for a long time. And but you know, Himachal makes me particularly excited about the improvement or just the response they've had during the pandemic. Literally within 2 weeks of the schools shutting down, the system had set up WhatsApp groups with all its teachers, with the kids' phones. I mean, the parents' phones. And every day they started sending structured competency-linked content to the kids to watch, which was just the video part of it, and then asking them to submit worksheets, and created a teacher hour for the kids, 2 hours. And we're talking about 6.5 lakh kids in the state. We're talking about a few tens of thousands of teachers. And through this, from now till from then to now, they've been able to, of the kids in the states are in these models, in the WhatsApp model. They're receiving the content, they're responding, they're sending their worksheets back, right? And then roughly 2 months back, they launched a small feature on WhatsApp, which is in partnership with a company called Convergenius, which sends this bot-based quizzes on WhatsApp. 95%, nearly 100% of the kids participate in that quiz. So all the content which is taught through the week is then tested on the weekend. It's a quiz, it's an adaptive quiz. All the kids are participating in that quiz. And we get a sense that on this topic they're getting 50% right and 80% right or whatever. So now coming back to why I gave this example for the question you asked, that my biggest learning from everything that we've done for blended, adaptive, gamification is that simplicity and familiarity is the key, right? I mean, just the fact that I have WhatsApp, I've used it before, I'm a teacher, I do, 98% of the teachers in WhatsApp, teachers in Himachal had WhatsApp. So, the system moved so fast because it was simple, it was familiar, they could all do it. There is no intimidation of another app, another environment, another complex thing. So if we are able to create that kind of an environment where the sort of like the intimidation of technology or the complexity is not coming in, but the simplicity is coming in, the use is coming, the utility is coming. I think within those constructs, some of the learnings that we are having, that adaptive has the most use, or gamification has the most impact. I don't think they work in those environments versus blanket statements like adaptive. But nevertheless, adaptive is the way to go. All of the work that we've done offline and online, including with organizations like yours, has always been teach the kids at their level. That's the most important thing we need to do in the classroom, especially in Indian classrooms, where you have with multi-grade, multi-level classrooms, kids with 3 levels, 4 levels, often sitting, teacher just being tasked with doing it. So adaptive is really the crux of the problem over here, and technology makes it really simple. Even in this Himachal example that I'm giving, the fact that the quiz is actually adaptive. So, the engagement is so high because kids very soon start moving to whichever level they are, whatever large scale deployments I've seen. And I'm now mixing both offline and online over here. The best results, the best outcomes that we've always seen is where the teacher is able to break down the student groups according to their level and administer at their level. And technology makes it much simpler. So therefore, there is just, in my mind, no doubt that adaptive, to the extent that the children can be taught at their level, teachers can transact at that level, is one crucial part of the problem. What we have relatively less data on is on the gamification part of it and the extent of the gamification. So in some examples, I've seen just simple things like leaderboards for kids gets them super excited, right? Just the fact that they can see how they're doing, getting badges, stars, and all of that gets kids very excited. And, that too is gamification. But if you actually, I've also seen, and again, this is all anecdotal data that I'm citing, the extent of gamification also sometimes makes very counterintuitive, but makes the kids bored, right? I mean, I'm really itching to get to the next level, but there is this whole gamification piece that I need to get through before I can get to the content. Can also tick the kids off, especially the fast learners. So there is both sides of it. I think on the gamification part, I've definitely seen it work. I've definitely seen engagement go up with that, but I really do not have any evidence, and more so from our experience on the field in the classrooms, I haven't seen that gamification per se is improving the outcomes, but adaptivity definitely.
Yeah, thank you for that. Pointing out the difference in what you're seeing. Compelling example with Himachal there. A lot of what you mentioned was getting at personalized learning and the benefits of adaptive to be able to deliver on that. Mekan, to build on this, there's a lot of data arguing that kids just need 21st century skills, right? One report came out saying that today's jobs are demanding, 60% of today's jobs are demanding digital skills and competencies like collaboration and critical thinking, key 21st century skills. And curious to know is, what do you see as the role of technology in helping kids to receive a 21st century education?
Thanks, Sandeep. I think people have spoken about it. I do want to underscore the first challenge of access. Like the kids, as in they need 21st century skills, but in some sense, if I were to think about what Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and others did in terms of getting school attendance or school enrollments up at the levels that they did, I think right now we're down to at most async message to a child with possibly a requirement for a printer, which doesn't exist in most households. So I think to me, like unless the device and access challenge gets solved, I think digital from a way of enabling a large number of people to step out of learning poverty or to be able to gain stuff, I think is a far out challenge. I think that said, that's current reality, and I wish and hope we can work aggressively towards solving that divide. The potential of technology to solve for, as in to enable children to have experiences that enable a lot more collaboration, that challenge them a lot more, that enable more critical thinking. I think the avenues for that, and like Namita said, the pedagogy for that can be easily applied like online and technologically. The internet is very wide and has lots of options. So I think the use of project-based learning, use of activity-based learning to be able to build stuff and do stuff online that allows young learners to build 21st century skills. I think the potential of technology there is massive. The challenge there is going to be around solving for motivation. With our schools, we've had the hostage learning model, as I call it, where children don't have an option. You ask a child between, hey, do you want to be on the playground or in the classroom? You know the answer. So that's the model that's worked. And we still don't have, like, in some sense, attempts at gamification are efforts to solve for motivation. Right? Like education finally will have to come clear and answer what's in it for the child. Why should the child stay on this learning app versus playing games or doing things that they want to do? Right. So where does their agency go? And given the internet offers them so much, and right now, at least the early answers I'm seeing are like, hey, you have settings that basically disable everything for the child. You have no freedom on this Zoom class. We experienced that. So I think how do you enable the freedom and agency for children and make this motivating and inspiring is the large challenge in front of educationists. And I think, unfortunately, the time in front of them is fairly short. It's not a problem educationists have had to solve for many, many years because you've had hostages. But now, like, if you do not solve that problem well, kids are not going to stay on your screen. They may look like they are on your screen. Thankfully, Zoom does not disclose that. And I'm sure there will be software that will come, which will start snooping on, hey, are you on the screen or not? And they will start doing that. But I wish that's not the way we go. I wish we can really make education fun.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to go back actually to the first thing that you said about access. And we're experiencing that a lot at Teach for India right now. And if you zoom out, even beyond the access challenges that we're going through with this pandemic, there's a growing body of people that are coming out and saying, look, like, you need to be cautious. And so you need to invest in the infrastructure and the technological hardware before you actually start to just go forward with a lot of this. And they caution countries like India in particular, with a poor infrastructure, relatively speaking, and poor hardware capabilities, and using technology too fast. And so, Prachi, I'd love to bring you back in here. And when you've been working with state governments, what are you seeing that's working, and what do we need to keep in mind as we approach this at scale, taking into account a little bit of what Mekin just said?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that both device as well as internet is a huge issue right now. I mean, I was giving an example of a state where we have those high enrollments. On the other end of the spectrum, we also have states which have single-digit enrollments, and it's directly proportional to the level of poverty in the state. We saw a big dip happen in our engagement numbers and our access numbers when the lockdown ended and parents started going back to work, because it was evident at that time that the single phone which was available for kids to use is no longer available because parents have gone back to work and the phone has gone with them. These are all single device homes. The time changed from, we had blocked 10 to 12 as the usage time for kids. The time changed from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. to us getting responses more later in the evening. So device is an issue, internet is an issue. It's a very large unsolved problem right now. And the conversations that we are having in the States are much less with the view of, you know, solving the problem regarding, just the lockdown with that perspective, what needs to be done, but really building back better, building for the future, and how do you solve that problem. So, the few conversations that I think are getting larger sort of salience across the system are, one is around, okay, which grades do we provision for first? So that is that's one pillar of this conversation. For what purposes? Is it, is it for the purpose of instruction, standardized instruction? Is it for the purpose of gamification, learning, engagement? Is it for the purpose of really personalizing to an extreme extent, right? So what are you using it for? Are you using it, so that changes the kind of technology solutions that are being talked about. And then I think finally that what is also being discussed, which is sort of like the implication of the second part of it, that what purpose are you using it for? What are the device ratios and what are the type of devices that you're looking for, right? If you're using it largely for instruction and not for personalization, then smart class type of solutions work. But if you're using it for personalization, then you need, personal devices and things like that. So what I'm actually finding as the emerging theory is that, let's use them for the middle school. So most states are most keen on using devices personalized adaptive learning in the middle school, more in the practice form, more for math and language. And this is just based on what different states think where their need areas are. The reasons behind them are much more that in the younger grades, they think that, their teachers they can train their teachers. They can actually use many other forms of materials for teachers that can substitute technology. And so that's not an area of urgent need. In senior grades, the need that they're finding is much more for standardizing instruction, especially when it comes to science and math, and the solutions that they're tending towards are much more towards smart class type of solutions. But really in the middle school is where the curriculum overload starts, where the need for adaptivity is high, where you can plug the gap. So that's one emerging theory that I'm seeing. The second is that it is much more towards the use of tablets versus use of like setting up devices, device labs and computer labs, what used to be the old models. It's much more around use of tablets. And again, everybody's almost talking about shared devices. There is just no state which can provision to the extent of one-on-one devices, usually 1:6 or 1:5 kind of ratios, which are getting discussed. And that too gets circulated between classes and gets rotated between different grades. So we're still talking about highly resource constrained environments, making some provisioning possible and using it for the purpose of extending practice hours for kids versus replacing instruction in any form or format.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Prachi. We have about 5 minutes left, and you mentioned something about building for the future. Mekan, I'd love to bring you back in here. There's that same U.S. Department of Education report that I mentioned a few minutes ago. What it also talked about was that we should be hopeful because the advancements in technology are much better than what they were 10 years ago. And the advancements are showing progress that should make us hopeful about the role of technology. Curious to know from you, what are you seeing as some of the biggest evolutions? What's making you hopeful, but also what's not making you hopeful?
I think most of the current ed techs are not making me hopeful. I think there is it just amplified fear marketing that enables them to make a good amount of money. Maybe also the kids are a little more engaged. I won't argue that kid engagement or learner engagement is possibly better, but I'm yet to see. MindSpark is the only tech solution from India that I know of that has a learning outcome report or an impact study that is worth its weight in salt. So I think from a learning point of view, I feel what Namita touched upon, we don't have enough experimentation going on. I wish there was a lot more experimentation going on in how can technology be a tool for both the learners and the teachers, right? Be a tool in the hands of the teachers so they can use it, they get comfortable with it, and they can deploy it for achieving goals that they want to achieve, versus technology having its goals on itself. I do think we are about at least 15, if not 20 years away from the virtual teacher, which can inspire and make you laugh. And so I think, like, if we are holding our hopes out for, hey, there'll be virtual teachers, we don't need teachers, I think that's good 15, 20 years away. So let's solve for the next 15, 20 years first, and maybe then, if at all, we'll have that answer. So, but I do think that the things that make me hopeful are, there are solutions or there are tools that are coming up. Like Quizzes is an interesting company which I'm a part of, and they've grown like crazy during the pandemic. They had no Southeast Asia presence, and it's a tool in the hand of teachers that just allows them to send any kind of quizzes and a lot of fun quizzes to kids. Used to be used in class, but now are being used extensively outside of classes. Kahoot, but with a few things added. So I think things like that are good examples of, hey, simple niche tools, but that serve the learner or the teacher.
Yeah. You've got some hopeful stuff coming out. As you mentioned, you also have a lot of things that should be making us pause, right? More experimentation. How do we put it more in the hands of the user? Namita, another thing that people are surfacing a lot is all of the risks that come with this, of online safety and everything that we need to be navigating. Like, how do we help kids and parents and teachers navigate those very real risks?
And I think it's a very important question that unfortunately has not really surfaced in conversations. Sufficient conversations are not happening. It's probably happening from the vantage point of parents. Maybe parents do not want to give smartphones, but really, like, how do you kind of solve for these things, right? So I think of the risk in 4 different ways. And again, I think I'm not an expert at this, as I'm saying that even I have not spent sufficient time thinking about it. But one, even like just thinking about developmentally appropriate content, which is a little harmless risk, but still, how do you give the right content to the student, to the children? And again, keeping it as a playground, as Mekin was saying, but still making it more age appropriate. And so that's one. And the other side of the same thing is, how do you make sure that the content, which is the problem that AI game creators, face a lot, that it is non-discriminate, does not have biases, right? That a lot of technology today has, right? So all the work that we are doing in technology broadly about thinking about removing biases, etc., we should really be thinking about and checking for some of those things in the content that is coming in the hands of children. While this may seem harmless at this point in time, but really you kind of end up teaching kids subconsciously certain values, right, which could be harmful. So that is one. The other, I think, is an important one to think about is, because the devices are shared between parents and children and across different parents and different age groups of siblings, how do kids don't inadvertently access the content which is not meant for them, right? And there's a lot of conversation about parent controls, but for example, like even I don't have a password on my WhatsApp, right? But if my nephew wants to use my smartphone, I probably have not thought about it, right? But so some of like little things, I think parent education here could help. It's not only about like just keep one parent control, kids control room, and that's what they can access, but really kind of thinking about creating boundaries in even everyday exposure to devices. Then the third thing is important one is that, at some point we will need to teach children about online safety. And I was thinking a lot more about a good touch and a bad touch equivalent in the online world, right? and this is an important one, which we have not even done a good job at, even in the physical world, right? But when you are in the online world, it becomes even more and more important because you don't know what's going on. And the fourth one I wanted to highlight is just the broader topic of mental well-being, right? So there is a surge of social media. The peer pressure is real across age groups, right? So these I think will require conversations, right? And even ability to have good conversations, right? So who are the adults who are, doing these conversations with children? So I think here I feel, as I was reflecting on this question, that there is a need for an organization, an opportunity for a non-profit to be created, much like Common Sense Media in US, which enables key best practices, but also become a little bit of a parent and the facilitators of education to children, an interface for them to kind of think about it, help them curate best practices, but also, starting from even curating right content for both academics, life skill, and even entertainment for that matter, right? Like what movies to watch and all of that. But really, just even in terms of how do you even think about safety and create a place for really talking about it and solving for it, and instead not just knee-jerk reaction, let's not do it, right? I think there is a way to solve for it, but there is a huge need to kind of think about it starting now.
Yeah, it's really important things to be thinking through and stuff that we're seeing as well within our classrooms. Huda, we're almost at it. We're at overtime actually, but I'd love to just bring you back in. One last question. Fast forward 12 months from now, we're all hopefully back in physical schools. You're back in school. You're in the 11th standard. What parts of technology would you want to keep? And what would you want to let go of that you're using now?
Okay, so I think something that I really want we to continue is to first of all, it's not from technology a small thing, like we to keep adapting in different things. I think like we don't know whether what the situation we will step in and when we will that come, but like I think we should be already prepared, with the lessons we learned during all this time of blended learning, how to really adapt and how that process look like. And I think that we should really apply right now too. And something like Google Classroom, I really talked a lot about it during my answers, because I think like we many times like switch on WhatsApp and try to think that there is only one way we can communicate, there is only one way we can organize. But I think when we look forward for different things, as so many ways we can organize things, and I think Google Classroom is one such example that we used in our classrooms with a lot of organization. And I think now itself also many teachers does not get enough time to correct books or to just check on where the face of students, like where they are going on. But I think when in the physical classrooms also, after doing the work and all, when kids continue submitting their work using Google Classroom, I think the feedback system that teachers give after seeing the work, I think that would be really helpful. I think that I really don't want anything to get rid of, but one thing I really want our minds to get rid of is that we to just like not limit our boundaries. We many times think that we can't learn something new by ourselves, but that's really not true. But I think especially children, as we should really try out things that we can really learn by ourselves, because one day there'll be no teachers around us. But I think we should really keep learning by ourselves. And a student, I think as a teacher, important role a teacher plays is not limiting that boundaries for students. Even though you are guiding to a student, feel free to guide, but at the same time, I think giving power, giving an encouragement to a student to try out the things they want, to just use the curiosity and just explore the resources they have is, I think, very important. So I just want to leave out with this message.
Wow, so beautifully said. Thank you so much for that, Huda. We're out of time. A big thank you to all of you for holding space on this. walking away with a lot of insights, with a lot of learning. So a big thank you. Karen, I'll turn this back over to you. And everybody else, I hope that the conference closes well for you. Thank you, everyone.